several years through the late 80s and early 90s, this quintet helped define an era and earned their place in R&B history. Along with their impeccable vocals, they also brought the heat with their dance moves. Sadly, behind the group's facade, battles over trust, money, and power would ultimately sabotage their success. American R&B group Troop began their musical journey in a modest apartment building in Pasadena, California, with a little boy named Rodney Benford, who loved to dance. One day, he saw New Edition at Magic Mountain. Not only was he impressed with their performance, he wished he could have been on stage with them. Rodney's mother noticed her son's talent and encouraged him to get together with some other boys in the neighborhood and form a dance troupe. So he rounded up several friends: Vernon, Stewart, Atron, and future troupe member Reggie Warren. In 1985, Rodney's mother got the teenagers on a TV talent show called Puttin' on the Hits, lip-syncing the New Edition song Cool It Now. They ended up winning and walking away with the $1,000 prize. Naturally, all the attention they got from winning caused other offers to come rolling in. One record producer contacted Reggie's mother asking if the guys could actually sing and not just lip-sync. She said yes, but that wasn't true. However, they weren't about to let this opportunity slip through their fingers. Since Vernon, Stewart, and Atron weren't interested in taking things any further, Rodney reached out to a classmate that he knew that could sing, named Steve Russell. Then a friend of his, John Harold, who also had a background in singing, wanted a piece of the action too. Alan McNeil was a friend of Steve's cousin and an aspiring singer and songwriter. When he sang for the other guys, they knew he was the missing piece to the puzzle. Under the watchful eye of Rodney's mother, the group practiced non-stop from the time they got out of school for the day until dark. And boy, did all that hard work pay off. Every competition they entered, they won. The group's local success drew the attention of a couple of music managers named Steve Cohen and David Cook, who also ran a production company called Platinum Gold. They set up a showcase for Atlantic Records executive Sylvia Rohn. She loved what she heard and signed the group right away. Fun fact, Troop is actually an acronym for Total Respect of Other People. The group released their debut single, Mamacita, in 1988. It went to number 2 on the Billboard R&B chart. And just like that, Troop was on their way. Their self-titled debut album dropped in June that same year. Their follow-up single, My Heart, also a top 10 R&B hit, put their best moves on center stage. Just 6 months after the release of their first album, Troop was back in the studio again to begin work on their next project. In the fall of 1989, their second album, titled Attitude, was released. It did well initially off the back of the lead single, I'm Not Souped, but the second single, Spread My Wings, would serve as the group's true breakout hit. Fun fact, the song was written by fellow R&B singer and co-producer of both of Troop's albums, Chucky Booker. He'd intended for it to appear on his own album, but when Steve heard it, he knew it would be perfect for Troop. Steve then proceeded to beg Chucky over the next several weeks to give it up. Chucky finally relented, and the rest is history. The song climbed all the way to number 1 on the R&B chart and became an instant classic. Chucky came in clutch once more when he suggested to Steve that Troop do a cover of the Jackson 5 song, All I Do Is Think of You. Little did Chucky know, Steve and John had already been thinking about doing just that. The group got it done and arguably ended up creating the greatest Jackson 5 cover ever. It became the group's second straight number 1 and is so loved to this day that almost everyone forgets that it was originally done by Michael and M. As Troop prepared to tour in the summer of 1990, their popularity grew the attention of Louis Burrell, the brother and manager of reigning hip-hop sensation MC Hammer. He was looking for one more R&B act to join Michele and After 7 on Hammer's tour. While on tour, Louis offered Steve a side deal and an advance to produce and write songs for artists on Hammer's own label, Busted Records. Louis also helped to open Steve's eyes about the behind-the-scenes business of the music industry. Through this education, Steve finally became aware of the truth about Troop's own contract. The group was actually never directly signed to Atlantic. They were signed through their production company Platinum Gold, so that meant that the group really didn't have much power. In 2 short years, Troop had achieved mega chart and tour success, but they didn't have much to show for it. Then Steve and Alan discovered that managers Steve Cohen and David Cook owned half their song publishing and that their own shares were being split with the 3 members of the group who weren't writing songs. Steve and Alan decided to set up a meeting with management to get to the bottom of things. Unfortunately, all they were told was to read their contract, alluding to the fact that the group had given their authorization for things to play out the way they did, and management did nothing wrong. In protest, Troupe simply stopped performing, forcing cancellation of their tour dates. Platinum Gold later filed a breach of contract lawsuit against the group. After cutting ties with the production company, Troupe signed a new recording contract with Atlantic. Steve and Alan also pushed to hire Lewis as their new manager, despite objections from Sylvia. As it would turn out, Sylvia wasn't being a hater. She was just trying to warn the group about what she believed was a bad move. But they didn't listen. In the midst of all the drama, Troupe added another credit to their resume, doing a cover smash-up of Stevie Wonder's Living for the City and Queen Latifah's For the Love of Money in the cult classic film New Jack City, which they all briefly appear in during a montage. The group went back into the studio in 1992 and came out with their 3rd album, Deepa. This time, Steve and Alan had a hand in writing nearly all the tracks, but they were no longer writing songs together. Their once close friendship was breaking apart. In the past, it seemed that they were destined to become a dynamic writing and production team akin to Babyface and L.A. Reid and Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. According to Steve in the group's Unsung episode, he felt that the more fame the group achieved, the more Alan pulled away from him. Alan, on the other hand, believes that their issues stemmed from him wanting to get more involved in producing and not only focus on writing. Their creative friction came to a head over the group's decision to include a song on the album by Babyface called Sweet November. Steve said Alan didn't want his vocals on the song, so that meant that his vocals would be front and center. Alan objects though, saying that since Steve was in control, he made the executive decision to take Alan's vocals off because they weren't, according to Steve, up to par. Nevertheless, Sweet November gave Troupe another #1 hit on the R&B chart. It would also end up being the group's last. While the group's other 2 albums broke the top 20 on the top R&B hip-hop albums chart, Deepa did not. As it stalled on the charts, tensions mounted between Sylvia Rhone and Louis Burrell. Then, before Troupe knew it, they were off the label. To keep their career going, Louis offered them a deal on Busted Records. Again, there appeared to be a divide in the group, with Steve and Alan on one side wanting to sign, and Reggie, John, and Rodney on the other not wanting to sign. According to John, him, Reggie, and Rodney did eventually sign in an effort to keep the group together. Sadly, that's not what happened. When Troupe's next album dropped, 1994's A Little Something Something, the cover art showed only 3 people: Steve, Alan, and Demetrius "Meech" Shipp. Meech, a writer and producer, was familiar with the group, having also worked with them on Deepa. The other 3 members didn't like Meech, so they decided to bow out of the project altogether. Meech made a point of saying in the group's Unsung episode that the album cover was Steve and Alan's idea, since the trio were the only ones putting in the work. Of course, Rodney, Reggie, and John were hurt and upset. As if that wasn't enough, there was also a spicy message to Sylvia Rhone included in the liner notes of the album.
To Sylvia Rhone, our jabs weren't good enough, so here's an uppercut. Too bad you didn't believe. This woman was responsible of taking us away from our own parents' place to our own places and had us to travel around the world. And this is the thanks that she gets?
Both Steve and Alan have since expressed regret and remorse for that action. Troupe did manage to pull it together for the release of Mayday in 1998, which featured all 5 original members. When that album died on the charts, they decided to call it quits. In the years that followed, the individual members worked behind the scenes on various writing and producing projects, collaborations, and other business endeavors. Steve, Alan, and John also released solo music. Fun fact, Steve now goes by the name Stephen Russell Hartz, after connecting with his father's side of the family in 2012 and deciding to add his last name. In 2013, after apologies were made and accepted, the quintet decided to come back together for good and begin touring again. But shortly after the release of their first single together in 15 years, on Steve's label, Alan started pulling no-shows to rehearsals. The reason? He was upset that their song didn't come out on Troupe's own label like he says they all discussed it would. As a result, the other guys let Steve know that they weren't interested in dealing with Alan anymore. With some reluctance from Steve, a letter was sent to Alan to officially dissolve his relationship with the group. Steve, Rodney, Reggie, and John John carried on, releasing several compilation albums over the next several years. Reggie passed away at his home in Pasadena on March 14, 2021. He was 52 years old. TMZ reported that he'd been dealing with health issues for a while and had been hospitalized for a couple of months at the beginning of the year. A rep for the group said that Reggie was released from the hospital the day before, with the anticipation he would pass away. Today, Troupe continues to tour and give it all they've got on stage, dedicated to keeping their legacy alive.